We're going to start with leaving Egypt today and how they hurried and they had to pack for 40 years in the desert. So I had that experience of having to figure out what to take and to hurry out. And then also, of course, today with the release of the hostages in Israel. It's the day that we're talking about the Israelites leaving Egypt and those 3 women who were released. And it's interesting because when I was in D.C., I was in D.C. a few weeks ago for a Hanukkah party in the Library of Congress, and they brought the family of 2 families of hostages in Israel, and one of the soldiers, the women that were released today, her sister was there. So I prayed with her, and I wished her to come out, and so it's an exciting day, definitely a very happy day, and in many ways. So I had that experience of leaving Egypt today.
Pack for the road.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the last one.
I'm going to, I just want, before we begin, Pope Francis had a meeting this week, an interfaith meeting with a group of Sufi Muslims from Albania. And I just want to quote from his talk that he gave that day about the importance of interfaith communication. He said, whenever religious leaders come together in a spirit of mutual esteem and commit themselves to the culture of encounter through dialogue, mutual understanding and cooperation, our hope for a better and more just world is renewed and confirmed. How much our world needs such hope. In these troubled times, all of us are called to reject the logic of violence and discord in order to embrace the logic of encounter, friendship, and collaboration in the pursuit of the common good. Indeed, our religious convictions help us to embrace more clearly these fundamental values of our common humanity and thus allow our different voices to unite in creating a melody of sublime nobility and beauty. I am convinced that the Bektashi community, that was the name of the group that was there, together with other Muslims, Christians, and all other believers, can serve as a bridge of reconciliation and reciprocal enrichment, not only within your country, but also between East and West. Despite the challenges of the present moment, interreligious dialogue has a unique role to play in the building of that future of reconciliation, justice, and peace for which the world's peoples, and especially the young, so ardently long. That was from Pope Francis's talk to a group of Sufi Muslims this week.
So after, 15 years that we've been doing this, do you still feel that?
I'm getting older, but getting a little numb, but that I still feel.
Okay, good. We haven't lost you there. Okay, so, welcome, my sister, brother-in-law Eli. My sister's name is Ayelet. Does this work?
Yes, it works.
You have to really talk into it.
Right in it? Okay, yeah. My sister's name is Ayelet, and the way to remember it is to say, I don't say it, I yell it.
Actually, the meaning is gazelle.
Meaning is gazelle.
Yeah, it's a gazelle or a deer. So, and Eli is her husband, and comes from the word Elijah, Eliyahu. Okay, so when we were trying to consider where to pick up after last time, we could have just gone to chapter 13, but actually we want to go to chapter 12, verse 37, because this is a very Christian passage, and we shouldn't skip it because it means a lot for the Christian. So in our blue book, you can follow, it's page 358. And we ended last time with the plague of the firstborn. And this was really the line of where the book of Exodus, if you remember when we introduced the book of Exodus, we said that the book of Exodus is divided to two parts. There is and I like to, just for the ease of memory, to say the house of slavery and the house of God. These are the two parts of the book of Exodus, because it's the book of redemption. And the book of redemption takes us from slavery, from oppression, right, into redemption. But what does that mean, to be redeemed? So the structure of the book tells us, it goes from the house of slavery, literally, it's called the house of slavery, a system of slavery, into the house of God, when the Israelites build the house of God. So it's literally, the book of Exodus divided almost equally to two parts. The whole story of leaving Egypt and the 10 plagues, and then there's a line in the middle, and once the Israelites leave, the purpose now for the rest of the book of Exodus is to build the temple, or the movable temple now. It's called the tent of meeting right now. So the tent of meeting, of course, meeting God. So redemption always has to do with God. That's what it's telling us, that redemption is impossible to achieve if you just leave Egypt. It's not enough. Because then, what is your system? There's no vacuum in people's lives. They need a system. Just like our body is built as a system. We'll always need to eat, we'll always need to drink, to breathe. So it just depends on what we'll eat, what we'll drink, and what we'll breathe. So it's telling us you were polluted. The house of slavery polluted your soul. And now you have to go into a system that will cleanse it. And then you build the house of God. So this is where the line crosses, and now we're literally on the other side of the book of Exodus. Okay, so it begins by saying the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot. So this is already, just this verse alone is a summary of this whole structure, because Ramses is the city that they built the pyramid, right? And that was the house of slavery. Into Sukkot. Sukkot, as you know, the feast of booths, right? The celebration of the feast of booths is called in Hebrew Sukkot. The word for the tabernacle, the booth, is sukkah. And the name, the etymology of the name comes from the cover of the sukkah, which comes from the word in Hebrew schach, which is just simple shrubbery that you cut of trees or plants and you just put it on top of a booth. That it's the opposite of a pyramid. That is stone, right? It's a structure that we still have 3,500 years later. A booth, if it lasts for a week, you're lucky. And the whole idea of the booth of Sukkah is the faith, that to say that even if you put big stones and walls and try to hide behind them, it's not going to help you, because the real help, the real security is God. So this is really the essence of the book of Exodus, is to break out of this conception in your mind that the Pharaoh and the slavery and the exhibition of power and domination is real power. It's not. I mean, I'm sure you've all been around for 9/11, and I remember when I was working in that industry, and I saw that in live, and the planes hit the towers, and then the second plane hit the second tower, and then the first tower falls, and then the second tower falls. It felt like a breaking of a conception. Something that you saw as so powerful. The Twin Towers were the symbol of the American power, and all of a sudden they collapse. So I would say this is similar. That those slaves in their mind, for 400 years, they're at least 4 generations they lived under this power, that they saw Pharaoh as God. He believed that he was God. And all of a sudden, to see them die, and then the Israelites have to leave. So now, just like those who are, unfortunately, those who are released today, they're released physically. But it'll take a long time, if ever, to be able to really leave their captivity behind. And we know that generation that left Egypt now did not enter the land, because they were not able to shed off the slavery. And God did not want the promised land to be polluted with the mindset of slavery. So that's where it begins. It begins right here. The children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot. Sukkot was the first place, but it's also the first idea that now we're going to trust God. About 600,000 men on foot, aside from children. So they counted from 20 years and up. That was the census that they took. They only counted men above 20. And the reason that they counted them above 20 is because they went to the military to defend whatever the camp was. So they estimate that there were probably a camp of 2 million people that walked through the desert. If it's only 600,000 men, right? So imagine, and no children. So of course, I would say about the same number of women, right? That's already 1 million too. Children, and the children, and one of the reasons that the text tells us, aside from the children, because when they left, it said that they left, in the word in Hebrew is chamushim, which means, the word chamesh means 5. So there's different ways to interpret the word 5, but one of the prevalent interpretation is that they were only a fifth, meaning 4/5 of the Israelites died during the plague of darkness, because they were not able to remove themselves, take themselves out of that slavery mindset and take the lamb, right? To take the lamb and to slaughter it and to put the blood on the doorpost and the lintel. So they died in the plague of darkness. So what it means is that those who left had 5 sets of children, because the children didn't die in the darkness, plague of darkness. So they had 5 sets of children. So they had many children leaving now. So the women that were not counted here and the children, and one more population, the multitude that came out with them. These are people who were not Hebrews, but also used the opportunity and wanted to join that Hebrew camp. So actually we believe that those people are the people who convert to Judaism today. Their soul is, they're attracted to that camp and they want to join the Hebrew camp. So, but all these people went with the Hebrews and they stood at Mount Sinai. So at Mount Sinai, everybody was in that covenant. So that is that's the idea. And the idea is that it's not just for the Hebrews. The Torah freedom was not only for the Hebrews. It was just the camp of the Hebrews. But of course, people can be grafted on. Okay, so also a mixed multitude went up with them, and flock and cattle, very much livestock. They baked the dough that took out of Egypt in unleavened cake, so they could not be leavened, for they were driven from Egypt, for they could not delay. Nor had they made previous provisions for themselves. The habitation of the children of Israel during which they dwelled in Egypt was 430 years. So this is why I wanted also to read this paragraph. This is a very important number here, because so 430 years. We know that the prophecy of God to Abraham was that one day his children are going to be enslaved somewhere for 400 years. Right? You remember that prophecy? It's very important. So 400 or 40 days in the desert, 40 years. We don't necessarily take it exactly literally, but what it means for sure, it means a long time. And it means a spiritual transition. Every 4 is a spiritual transition. And it's interesting because the word for 4 in Hebrew connotes the letter, the 4th letter in Hebrew. The Dalet and like the delta in Greek, but delta, yeah, it is the 4th. Yeah, in Greek. So it's the alphabet, but Aleph Bet is Hebrew. So the 4th letter, Dalet, is the same word as a door. So we know that every spiritual transition has to go through that door. So what it means here, they were slaves for a long time, but also they went through a transition from being a family into a nation that would follow God now.
So, jumping into this idea of the door, I know if you're not aware, Pope Francis said it's a regular thing that happens every 25 years in the church, has opened the doors of the major churches of Rome. And we'll have, it's called a holy door, and you go through the door. And not just to walk through it, that's one piece of it, but you are transitioning into a new reality. So this is a Jubilee year. So it's a year of redemption, a year of forgiveness and mercy, a year of healing. So every 25 years, the church uses the same idea to go through the holy door. Once the year is completed, it'll be bricked up again, and then it'll be opened again in 2050. So every 25 years, coming from the idea of Jubilee out of the Old Testament, we'll hear about that as we go. So the door is a transition. There's a threshold, and all religious experiences have a threshold experience. You're on one side, you cross, and now you're in a whole new place. So all religious conversions and religious experiences have something of that you move from one place to the next. It's a transition period.
You should tell the green carpet story.
The green carpet, oh yeah, well that's another story. That's okay. That's too complicated. So the door motif is very important in all transitions. And we do this ceremoniously at graduations, ordinations, all these different important ceremonies, and of course a wedding too. You know, you walk in one way, you walk out somebody else. You know, something else has happened. There's been a transition, and it's a religious experience of moving forward on the journey.
To take it a step further, if you notice in the New Testament, in the life of Jesus, we have the number 40 used a couple of times. Okay, so he was 40 days in the desert after his baptism. All right. What that signifies, the number 40 contains the number 4 and then a multiple of 10 or 100, is that in Jesus' life, these moments represent periods of transition. So the 40 days in the desert that Jesus spent was his transition from his private life to his public life. The 40 days after his resurrection to his ascension, okay, the transition from his earthly life to his heavenly life. So again, that number carries over. It's a wonderful thing, especially if you like numbers, to understand the significance of numbers in Hebrew. It just makes everything just come alive. So the numbers then, when you read them, are not meant to be taken so much literally as symbolically, and especially the number 40 in the life of Jesus.
So 430 years, some count it differently. So definitely, I mean, we take that the Torah says 430, but there's different counting for when was the starting point. Because we have a midrash, a teaching, that said that they were actually slaves, not for 400 years, but 210 years. And it's a midrash that goes, just looks at a certain word and the numerical value. But what it means is that God, because the story says that God saw how miserable they were, and decided to take them out, just like the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, when it was time for him to be released from jail. When he solved the Pharaoh's dream, it says that they hurried him out of the pit. So, and God tells us in Isaiah, when time comes, I will hurry it. So we really understand that God pardoned the people of Israel, and they didn't complete a full 400 years. But the Torah still says 430 years. But it could be that they were in Egypt for 430 years, since Jacob came down with the brothers, with the children of Israel. They came down as a family. But originally they were in Goshen, right, in a very fertile area, and they were herdsmen, so they could live, they maybe have lived there, we don't know how long. It just says at a certain point a new king arose that didn't know Joseph. But we don't know exactly how long it took from the time that they moved to Egypt for the new king to rise. So they could have just been slaves for 210 years. Okay. then it says it was at the end of 430 years, and it was on that very day that all the legions of the Lord left the land of Egypt. Why is it important to say that all the legions of the Lord left the land of Egypt? Because up until now, and it's interesting, I mean, the what's going on with the hostages now with Hamas, it's the same mind game. It's this vicious mind game of I'll release 3 today, another 3 next week, and just keep pulling your nerves. So, because Pharaoh, along the over the 10 plagues, he kept saying, "Oh, you want to go worship? Okay, so only the men will go, right? And then only this will go." And at the end, Moses told him, "No, we're all going." So this is why it was important to mention that everybody left that day. It was a night of anticipation for the Lord to take them out of the land of Egypt. This was the night for the Lord, a protection for all the children of Israel for their generations. So what are they talking about here? That night will be the night for generations. What is that night that they left Egypt?
Passover.
The Passover night, right? So later on, it would be the Last Supper of Jesus, right? So this is that night. And this is the night of transition. Literally, the blood on the doorpost and then leaving. This is the night of transition. And the word for Passover, Pesach, in Hebrew literally means, right, to pass over. So it's not just that the angel of death passed over their doors or their houses. It really means that they themselves also passed over into a new reality, not yet of a totally free people, but going towards freedom.
So the word Pesach in Hebrew, and we get the word Passover from that. But unfortunately in English, we lose the connection because we call it Easter. Okay, and that's totally not related to anything almost. I don't even know the origins of Easter. But the word Pesach is kept in Spanish and the Romance languages. It's Pascua. Okay, so Pascua in Italian, in Spanish, you hear, and we call it the Paschal mystery, the Passover of the Lord. So from life through death to new life. So the Passover. So we always hear it, and I'm sure a lot of people just don't hear it. You don't understand the Paschal mystery. So that's that word Pesach. And that's better translated in Latin. What is the Pesach in Latin? Is it Pascha? Pascha?
We say Pascha.
Pasqua? I think it's Pasqua, something like that in Latin. So the Latin keeps it, the Greek keeps it with a P sound at least. Give it a P. Passover, Pesach. And now we call it Easter. So unfortunately, it's really a bad translation there.
It's a funny rabbit translation.
What's that?
It's a funny rabbit translation.
Yeah, Bunny Rabbit translation.
Ostara was the pagan holiday around that time.
Yeah, it's got some kind of, it's a German thing, and it came through the Germanic church, and it just kept.
The word Easter is Germanic.
Yeah, Germanic or something.
So this is the night of transition. And what Father Roy was saying about the moving from death to life, the resurrection, remember, Judaism and Christianity agree on the resurrection. We both believe that the ultimate hand of God or the act of God is bringing back life. And the story of Passover is bringing back life, because slavery is considered death. So the fact that the Hebrews, the Jewish people, were slaves for so long, They were dormant, and then they came back to life, because life is freedom, is a story of resurrection. Passover, even from a Jewish perspective, is a story of resurrection. Okay, so the next paragraph, of course, is very related to the Christian theology. That the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the decree of the Pesach offering, the Paschal lamb. No alienated person may eat in it." Okay, so in Hebrew is someone who is foreign. Okay, so but you have to understand what foreign means. So he's going to explain that. Every slave of a man who was bought for money, you shall circumcise him, then he may eat in it. Okay, so when I invite people for Passover at my house every year, I just say, there's only one condition. Well, we don't do that anymore. We don't ask, but this is the
Don't ask, don't tell.
but this is the idea of the circumcision. I would say, if we don't take it literally, what it means is because there's a circumcision of the heart as well, right? The idea of God giving us a new heart and will circumcise our heart. What it means is a person that is grafted onto that idea. Not someone who would sit at the Seder night and still believes in slavery and still believes in that system of house of slavery. That is a foreign idea that we need to pass over. Okay, so then it says, a sojourner and a hired laborer may not eat in it. So if that's a foreigner, because someone who was even a servant at somebody's house, they share the household. But if you're just passing by or you are a hired laborer, may not eat in it. In one house shall it be eaten. You shall not remove any of the meat from the house to the outside, and you shall not break a bone in it. Okay, that means a lot, I know, and I'll let the Catholics here explain the not to break the bones, right? Do you want to explain that?
Well, the prophecy, and we all know that when Jesus was crucified, Pilate had told the centurion to go and break the legs of all of those who were hanging on the cross if they weren't dead. And the breaking of the legs, what that would do is it would prevent them from using their feet to reach back and expand their lungs so that they would suffocate. I mean, Jesus, don't forget, with all of the wounds that Jesus went through, his ultimate cause of death was suffocation. So, but the prophecy was that not a bone of his shall be broken. Okay, and that's why we have the tradition of the centurion piercing the side of Jesus, because Jesus was already dead and there was no need to break the bones of his leg.
And of course, the theology behind it, if he's the Lamb of God, I'm explaining. A rabbi explaining.
He's learned well. He's learned well.
The Christian theology. That's the interfaith idea here. That if he's the Lamb of God, that any offering to God, a sacrifice, has to be unblemished. So if you brought an animal to the temple and it had any blemish or a broken bone, you couldn't bring it. So that the theology behind it. The entire assembly of Israel shall perform it. When a proselyte sojourns among you, he shall make the Pesach offering for the Lord. Each of his males shall be circumcised, and then he may draw near to perform it. And he shall be like a native of the land. No circumcised male no uncircumcised male may eat of it. Okay, so we get the idea here. You have to get into the covenant. The circumcision is, the word for circumcision in Hebrew is brit. So it really is and it means covenant. So it really is the essence of covenant, because Abraham, that was his first act of becoming a Jew. He was an idol worshiper. He was just a person. And then when he circumcised himself, that's when he entered the covenant with God. So if you're in that covenant, you may be Jewish or not, but you have to be circumcised in terms of entering that covenant. Okay, so then the law shall be for the native and the proselyte who live among you. All the children of Israel did as the Lord has commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they do. It happened on that very day, the Lord took the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt in their legions. Okay, you've heard the word on that day now several times, right? So why is it very important to say on that very day? So on the surface, the simple explanation, as we say in Hebrew, the pshat, the simple explanation is to say that it was on that date. So every year when you celebrate the Passover, we have to do it on the same day, which is the full moon of that month. It's the month of Nisan in Hebrew, but in the Torah, it's considered the first month. So this is very important theologically. Why? Because the first month should be the month that God created the world. And that's when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We celebrate creation on Rosh Hashanah. But on Passover, from the book of Moses, is the first month. The Passover and Easter. Why? Because, and this is crucial to understanding the book of Exodus, because the book of Genesis and the book of Exodus in the Talmud, the rabbis tell us they are one unit. They're one unit split to two books. And what are the two units together? Creation and redemption. Genesis is the book of creation of the world, creation of the family of Israel. But then Exodus is the redemption. And creation is here for the purpose of redemption. Creation doesn't stand on its own. God didn't just create the world because he wanted to have, rocks and trees. There's a lesson here to be learned. And the lesson to be learned is the redemption. And as we said, redemption always means going to God. So God wants us to understand that all this creation, we should not be like Egypt that focus on the material. That only what you see, touch, feel is real. No, actually, what you don't see, touch, feel, and smell is the redemptive part. Right? No thing. Nothing. God is no thing. So, Christianity went to that God does have a body and here, but the idea that there's nothing besides God. So nothing in this world is redemptive. Only God. So that's the idea. The second deeper level of this idea of the one day is that it's a creation, right? God created the world in 7 days, and every day was on its own. It says there was evening and there was morning, that one day, and then second day and third day. It means that this continues the creation. So the book of Exodus, of Genesis, created the world, and now God is creating the redemption and the redemptive mechanism. This is very important. The first commentary on Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1, says that Bereshit, the word Bereshit, Genesis, is for Genesis. And what is the Genesis? Genesis is Israel. So the whole world, the creation, was for the purpose of inserting one day a nation that would will engrave on its heart that only God is redemption. That really is the mechanism here.
Just to make another point, you know what the greatest sin for an Israelite or a Jew would be? It would be idolatry. And the interesting thing about idolatry is that when you worship an idol, the idol has no power to save. So when we worship things like money or another person or an idea, as much as we believe in that, they have no power to save us. And to make a connection, and this is kind of my own thinking, that when God created the universe and he said that he was creating humans in his own image and likeness, I want to take that, first of all, in terms of the context. The context of God saying to humans that they are of the image and likeness of God, the context is creation. So one of the great images of God that we possess and have to live out are to be co-creators. We are called as human beings to co-create, to continue the creation of the world. All right? So, and that is, other people philosophically can describe maybe what the image and likeness of God is. But contextually, from Genesis, human beings are called on to continue the creation of God, because that was the context. That's what we knew God to be at that moment, was the creator. So that is a great responsibility for us. And as Christians and as believers, we are called upon to carry on a redemptive attitude towards the world. We have been redeemed. And we are also being called on to continue the creation of a redeemed world. And that's, in a certain sense, from a spiritual point of view, that's how it connects very often to who we are. All right? To see, it's changed my perception in terms of what it means spiritually, because now I see myself as the image and likeness of God, as one who is called on to continue creation, to continue the work of God in the world.
And do the wine and the bread.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's too. I'm just going to say, I always love the image of a symphony. I went to the Messiah, was played at St. John the Evangelist. They had the North Shore or East End choir. I thought it would be nice. It was spectacular. And they really had a symphony, and they had a full chorus, and they did all the parts of the Messiah, all the pieces. It was overwhelming. And I said, God gets his kicks out of seeing a symphony. Seeing like what these people did with metal and wood and this and that strings and made this beautiful thing. Look what we are able to do as people, to create and to continue the work of God in the world, making it beautiful, making it to rejoice and give God the glory. That and the Messiah, oh my goodness, because the whole thing is if you know it, it's Isaiah. It's written, the whole thing, the whole text. So that's one thing. And then Gadi, when we just said bread and wine, we use bread and wine, and Jews, we got it from the Jews, of course, but it's interesting that, the wheat gets crushed and loses its identity in a sense, and it dies in a sense, but it forms bread. It's even better. And so it's perfected by human intervention. Same with wine. You eat a pile of grapes, that's good, nice, very good, but wow, do some human intervention there, crush the grapes. So these are the elements that we use in the Passover Seder, and then of course in the Last Supper, the bread and the wine. So it's human intervention. In the Mass we say, the fruit of the vine and the work of human hands. So it's right there in the liturgy too for us. So we say, the fruit of the vine, the work of human hands.
Right, and that's redemption. So the bread symbolizes the body and the wine our soul, that we need to cooperate with God and be co-creators. So actually the story worth telling here about the circumcision, because this is really in this context, that circumcision is the way that we perfect God's creation. And there's a famous story in the Talmud. I know I see some faces here, like, what does that mean? So there's a famous story in the Talmud that Rabbi Akiva lived around the time of Jesus, and he was summoned by the Roman general, and the Roman general told him, because the Romans were just like the Greeks. They did worship the body and the physical. And he said to the big rabbi, he said, you better give me a very good explanation of why you mutilate the body, the perfect body that God created. How dare you say that you can take this, what God created, and make it better? So he said, otherwise I'm going to kill you. So Rabbi Akiva said, give me 5 minutes. And he comes back with a bunch of wheat, just he picked it from the field, and he holds it, this bushel in his hand. And then on the other hand, he holds up a bread. And he says to the Roman general, which one would you prefer to eat? And of course, the general said the bread. Said, well, this is God's creation. Why don't you just eat it like that? So it's the same idea. It's a forest versus a garden. So it is cultivated. So that is the covenant, the redemptive covenant with God, that we say we are co-creators. Okay, we begin chapter 13 here, and it says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, sacrifice to me every firstborn, the first issue of every womb among the children of Israel, of man and beast, is mine. This is very important to understand. Why is the firstborn? God is basically telling Moses and Aaron that the firstborn of every woman, not firstborn of every man. It's both, man and women, but it's if, let's say, a man has 2-3 wives, right? So it's not just the firstborn for him, it's the first issue of the womb. So every first issue of the womb has to be given to God now. And Jews still maintain the same ritual that we have to redeem the firstborn. If it's male, we have to redeem them. Why is that? Why does God tell us that the firstborn belongs to him? because he saved all the firstborn, those firstborn in Egypt. They were supposed to die in the plague of the firstborn. So he skipped over them, so they now belong to him. And these are the people that would now go, when he said sacrifice, it doesn't mean put them on the altar, right? Like Abraham. It really means designate them to serve me. So they are the representation of each family that went to serve in the temple. So it's interesting that in Christianity today you have the priest. Every large family usually has at least one priest, right? And this was actually how it was supposed to be for Jews as well, the firstborn. But what happened was, the worst sin was the idol worshipping of the golden calf later on in the desert. And what happened at that incident, God gave those people who worshiped the idol a chance to repent. And Moses told them, I give you the benefit of the doubt that you worship this idol because I went to the mountain and you didn't have the security of God with you. So you wanted to worship really the God who took you out of the land of Egypt. And that's what Aaron says when he creates the golden calf. But you have to show me now that I'm back now, that you really weren't worshiping the statue. So there's two ways that you can see the worship of the people of Israel, that statue. One is that they worshipped the one God in a foreign way, or worshipped a foreign God. Okay? So Moses didn't do anything yet. He destroyed the idol, but he gave the people a chance and said, who is for God? Come to me. And what happened was, only the Levites came to him. And from that moment, all the firstborn were substituted for the Levites. So the Levi tribe became the tribe that serves the temple. But originally it was supposed to be more egalitarian, that each family would designate a representative. Okay, so that's what it is.
Just to clarify too, the word sacrifice, it can be seen in two ways, right? Literally, the word sacrifice means to make holy.
Right.
All right, to make holy. You can use the word sacrifice, as many of us think of it, as a holocaust, as a burnt offering. But the word also means a gift, an offering. Okay, so very often when you hear the word sacrifice, doesn't necessarily mean burning something or in the mode of a holocaust, but it's a gift. It's a gift that is what we make holy. Okay, so that's just to clarify in our own minds. When Gadi said, sacrifice to me every firstborn, give me each firstborn as a gift so that they can be made holy.
Yeah. So there are two words for, of course, translations always are not always accurate, but they use the word sacrifice here for two different words in Hebrew. So when God commanded Abraham to literally sacrifice his son, it used a different word in Hebrew. It was literally to korban, to alot le'olah. He said to really elevate him for olah. Olah is burnt offering. He literally told him that. So, but here it says it uses the root of holiness, kadesh, to separate. The word holy means separate. That's what it technically means. When you say, oh, I live a holy life or the holy anything, it means that it's a separate and designated. So the first time we see the word holy is in the context of the Sabbath, when God created the world and he separated the seventh day and made it holy. So that's what it means. So holy in this context, sacrifice, it means to designate, separate the tribe of Levi to serve in the temple. By the way, the Cohen, the priests, right? They are a family within the tribe of Levi, right? So Aaron, the family of Aaron, who was the brother of Moses, the priests, the Kohanim, came from his family. But all the rest of the tribe of Levi assisted the Cohen, the priest. The priests themselves dealt with the fire, the core. They brought the sacrifices. They were the only family that were allowed to deal with the fire itself. Everybody else, the Levites, they were the assisting to that task.
You might think of priests and deacon in the Christian context. So deacon assists. A deacon will assist the priest, but he doesn't do the consecration. So it's the same kind of an idea. It's like a helper. So the Levites, so everybody is a Levite. Some Levites are Cohens. And it is interesting in the tradition, with the name Cohen, you might know people named Cohen, they are a priestly family. And then anybody Levin or Levine or Levi, they're Levites. They're not priests. And to this day, when a Levite or a Cohen is in a synagogue, they have special privileges to do blessings and prayers.
I would just say responsibilities too. So they have, the first honor to come to the Torah, to read from the Torah, is a Cohen. The second one is a Levi, and then everybody else follows. You had a question?
Yeah, when it says sacrifice to me, every firstborn, is it understood to mean every firstborn male? Or was it understood to include both genders?
Yeah, it really is. It's referring to, again, the text always has to be interpreted, but it is male. Yeah.
Now it says sanctify, not sacrifice. Here it
Yeah.
says sanctify.
Here it says sanctify. Right.
It's the same, to make holy.
Yeah.
To make holy.
Make holy. Okay, so then it continued. It says, Moses said to the people, remember this day on which you departed from Egypt, from the house of bondage. Right? You came out of a house of bondage, not just from bondage. It's a very important distinction. It's a nuance that tells that distinguishes between somebody took you as a hostage. And actually the word I would not translate as bondage, literally slavery. It's mibeit avadim, house of slavery. Because a house of slavery means it's a system of slavery. It's a mindset, right? Hope I'm not bashing anything here, but like a lot of corporate America or corporations that you go and work for, they see people as numbers, as this is, okay, you have to have your quota. It's not so much the personality and the person. I know that corporate America and other big corporations try to move from that spirit of you're just a number, you have to get here at 9 to 5, do your work and go home, and if you don't, you'll be fired that day and we'll replace you with another brick, right? But that's the idea. That's the idea. We have to take that very seriously, I would say, because otherwise we lose our identity. So you have to leave that house of bondage or house of slavery. The word for the book of Exodus in Hebrew is Shmot. And it begins with the word, these are the names of the people of Israel, the family of Israel, that came down to Egypt. There were 70 of them, and it lists them. So this is exactly the opposite of house of slavery. There's a house of slavery, you're a number, you're a brick. But the book of redemption tells us that we first are names. That really is the transition is from slavery. Oh, I was just a number a minute ago. I really have to find my identity. So, for with a strong hand, the Lord removed you from here, and therefore, chametz, leaven, may not be eaten. Okay, so that's God's commandment that on Passover, we don't eat anything leavened. So what does that represent? Why is the leavened bread is a representation of Passover? What is it about? So of course, there's a simple level explanation and the deeper explanation. The simple explanation is because when they left Egypt, they were in a hurry, right? Curry in a hurry, and they had to leave quickly, and they didn't. The dough didn't rise, didn't have time to rise. But of course, on the other hand, the deeper explanation is that to have a dough that rises. Remember, dough and bread is a representation of our body, right? So you can be a rising dough with your ego, or you can be humble. So the word for bread, the unleavened bread, is also called a humble bread. And some translate as a bread of affliction or a bread of poverty. But the word is oni, and oni means poverty, but it's the same word as humility in Hebrew. So it really is the bread of humility, and I subscribe to the school of thought that it is humility and not poverty. For one main reason is when it says that the Messiah will come one day, will ride the donkey, he will be, it's the same word, ani. So it could be poor and riding the donkey, right? So if somebody rides a donkey, they're not poor. Because donkey, if you remember, represents material. So it's the same word in Hebrew. The word for donkey and material is the same word. So they have material, clearly, just by the fact that they're riding a donkey. So it means that the Messiah is a person of means, but yet stays humble. That is the challenge. When you're a poor person, it's not a challenge to be humble. Right? And the New Testament says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than a wealthy man to go into heaven, right? And because of the humility.
One little note on that, if you go to the Holy Land, you go to Jerusalem, the Russian Orthodox Church right next to the Holy Sepulchre has the eye of the needle. So there is the gate, the main gate of the city would have been an open way, and then at night they close it for protection, for security. And there is a hole next to the gate. That's called the eye of the needle. And a camel couldn't come through there. Only a man on foot can reach through. You have to duck your head, and you climb through. Now, if I'm the watchman and I don't like you, I just club your head. It's very easy for security. One guy can keep the gate secure. So that's the eye of the needle that Jesus is referring to. It's not, the thread and all that stuff. So the camel can't go through it, and a donkey can't, a horse can't. Only a man on foot, and one at a time. So that could be the control right there to make sure the place is secure. So there is a place, people go hopping through it, it's quite a nice little spot there. It's very,
Next to the
very
Holy
beautiful.
Sepulchre?
Yeah.
And it's a man unladen, right? The man is not carrying anything.
Yeah, he could carry a little bundle maybe, but not,
The materialism stays outside.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I just want to follow up on what Gadi was saying about the idea of the names, which dignify what's going on. In terms of our own relationship with God, we have to remember that God calls each one of us by name. And the impact of that is the story of the resurrection, the day of resurrection. And Mary Magdalene is in the garden. And she recognizes the risen Christ because he calls her by name. He says, Mary. All right? Yes?
Today's reading of Isaiah says, I will give you a new name.
Okay. Yeah.
Repeat that. So
The words of Isaiah is that I will give you a new name. Okay. So, and also the concept of being able to name, that's why when God created human beings, he gave them the power to name the animals, which gave them a certain, I want to use the word power, but not in the worst sense of the word, of in terms of their element or their place in creation. So the ability to name is very, very important and a dignified element of being human. Okay. The other thing is that when Gadi was talking about leaven and so on, if you remember on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. He didn't say you are the meat and potatoes of the earth. Right? You are the salt of the earth. And then he says you are like leaven. You are not the loaf of bread, you are the leaven. And therefore, when Gadi talks about the necessity of being humble, that's exactly what Christ was saying in the Sermon on the Mount. You are the salt of the earth and you are the leaven. All right? Don't think that you are the meat and potatoes or the big loaf. Okay?
I mean, there's many concepts here that come together, of course. We are the name, the essence of a person is their name. So definitely that. And the just to expand on the door that Father was talking about, when we talked about the door, right, of the transition, the Dalet, the 40, number 40, the word for that word, Delet or Dalet, is also for humility. It's another word, not the same word as poverty or humility. It's a different word for humility. So that door that you enter through, you have to be humble in order to pass through. And that's the transition that you go through. The spiritual transition is always going from haughtiness into humility. That's always the transition. Because when you go from the house of slavery, it means that you think you're above people, right? You believe in that system of hierarchy of someone above somebody else. But when you go to God, you know we're all the same. And it's not about you. It's about a bigger story that you're just a small piece of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess we're going to get to it, of course, where God shares his name. That's going to be another step on this relationship with God. So he's going to eventually reveal his name to Moses with the burning bush. We're getting there. So again, and then when there's an intimacy when you have the name, already.
Yeah.
We do that.
From the Christian point of view, in terms of the word humility, for so many years, people walk around with the idea of humility meaning weakness of some sort. Okay, walking around with your head down, you're more interested in the cracks in the sidewalk than what's going on in the world. All right. The word humility, from a spiritual point of view, means a true estimation of yourself. A true estimation of yourself. That's humility. Another way of putting it is see yourself as God sees you. Okay? But a true estimation of yourself means that you begin to see yourself, hopefully, not as the meat and potatoes, but as the salt of the earth, or as the leaven. But humility is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of recognition of who you are.
Another really evidence that the idea of the unleavened bread is about humility, and not just in the context of Passover, is because all the rest, if it was just about the Passover and to mimic or reenact the Exodus from Egypt, then the rest of the sacrifices wouldn't also be commanded to be brought with unleavened bread. So there's only one sacrifice offering, because there are different types of offering, right? The burnt offering, the Thanksgiving, and so forth, sin offering. So only the Thanksgiving, and this is in a different context, you can bring with leaven, but all the rest of the offering that were brought to the temple were brought over unleavened bread. So it means that the whole idea of coming in front of God is to be humble, the whole process is supposed to result in humility. Okay, take a couple more minutes for the text and then we'll open up for questions. Today you are leaving in the month of springtime, and it shall come to pass when the Lord shall bring you to the land of Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, which he swore to your forefathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey. You shall perform this service in this month. So this month always, that's why Passover is always in the springtime. So the whole Jewish calendar is always constructed that way, that Passover will fall in the spring. That's why some years we have a leap year, that we double the month before Passover to push it, because we follow the lunar calendar, but we adjust to the solar. For 7-day period shall you eat matzot, and on the 7th day there shall be a festival of the Lord. Matzot, the unleavened bread, shall be eaten throughout the 7-day period. No chametz, no leaven, may be seen in your possession, nor may leaven be seen in your possession in all your borders. So you can't even hold it in your closet, right, in your cupboard on Passover. So I always, before Passover, I called Don. I said, Don, I have all this pasta for you.
I don't know what to do with all this matzah meal.
You can have your celebration. And you shall tell your son on the day, saying, it is because of this that the Lord acted on my behalf when I left Egypt. And it shall be for you a sign on your arm, and a reminder between your eyes. So this is the tefillin. You've heard of the phylacteries that we wrap around our arm, and the box in the above our head that we're supposed to be there, because that's a reminder of both the mind and the action. The action should be for God, and the mind should be for God. But it's very interesting, just as a side note, the two boxes are not the same. They look the same from the outside, but the box that is on our forehand has 4 compartments. So it has 4 different passages from the Torah. But what it means is that mind-wise, you can think and be open to everything. There's no limit. But your actions should be unified. The box of the hand is one compartment. So you can think many ways, and debate it. And we know that the Talmud is 1,000 years of debating, of rabbis debating. But yet when it comes to the halacha, the practice, we have basically one practice. Different ways, but basically one ideal practice. Okay, so then it says, and it shall be on your arm and remind you between your eyes, so that the Lord's Torah may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand the Lord removed you from Egypt. You shall observe this decree and its designated time from year to year. So I think we'll stop here. This was the transition that we've made from slavery into putting us on the path to freedom. And literally they're now ushered into the wilderness. And the wilderness is where they would meet God in many, many ways and many forms. Of course, receiving the law, but the wilderness is where you're in between. You're not here nor there. And this is where God is the most pronounced in our lives, because it's the leap of faith. It's you're leaving somewhere and you're going somewhere and you're on the way. And I would conclude by saying that way is the most rewarding in the sense of connecting to God, because of that idea of leaving and leaping, but also it's the most dangerous. Because that's when the Amalekite attacks you. And we will see that next time. When we were most vulnerable, we were attacked by the Amalekite. Same thing as Eve in the Garden of Eden was attacked by the serpent. It's the same typology that we go through. So this is, at least we transition today.
And to finish off from a Christian point of view, that's why before Jesus starts his public ministry, he goes into the wilderness, spends that period of transition. And the wilderness, is in terms of Israel, and when they talk about the wilderness, it's a dangerous place. Okay? And so Jesus goes in there to meet and confront Satan, okay, the accuser. Don't forget the word Satan means the accuser. He meets Satan in a dangerous place, and he emerges full of the Spirit to go on to his public ministry.
That's it.
That's it? Wow.
Well, also it's interesting when Jesus is tempted in the desert, for power and for food. He's dealing with, those temptations that Israel also had to endure in the desert, and he, corrects or continues that battle between I'll give you all the palaces of the earth, you'll be able to have control over everything, and he says no. So Israel's going through its journey through the 40 years in the desert. Jesus does 40 days in the desert. And one comical note: we were on our way to the Holy Land once. We got hit by a blizzard. It was a blizzard. And we got to Kennedy Airport way very late. And the planes, of course, were not flying, and off, and then what's going to be tomorrow at this time, it's going to be this time. And we were there, and it was so interesting. Very Catholic crowd. We had a Blessed Mother statue about this big. Somebody was taking around the, you guys were there. That's right, you guys were there. So I'm not telling a lie. So it was amazing. So half the crowd was Catholic, and you'd hear the rosary going. We're there for hours in the terminal, and the other half were on El Al. The other half is all Jews. So they're doing davening, they're doing the prayers and stuff. It's like, look at this, And we shared food and all that stuff. We had a great time. But I was getting we're missing part of our pilgrimage. We're missing this. Lord, what are you doing? What is this about? What are you doing? So I'm kvetching, all right? I'm kvetching. I'm laying on the floor on a piece of cardboard because there's no place to be. But all right, okay, here we are. So I said, Lord, what's up? what's the meaning? What is this for? And it's, this is intolerable. This is terrible. I said, listen, it's better than 40 years. No, I calculated, that's right. I calculated in my time how much of the pilgrimage we're missing. So the time we left the shrine, then they told us the time we're going to leave tomorrow, the next day, and then add the 10 hours, it came to 40 hours. It was 40 hours. And I was like, it's 40 hours better than 40 weeks, 40 years.
Amen.
Any questions?
Any question? Yeah.
Why is the covenant focused on the circumcision as something so special? Couldn't it have been something else?
Very good question.
Another 2 years to talk about it.
The question is, why is the covenant the circumcision? Couldn't be something else? But, of course, I mean, it could be anything, but this is where we continue. This is our continuation. So this is where we, as a person, extend man, but it's the extension. This is where children come from. So this is where you literally
participate in the
creative power.
Well, it seems to me that also when you subjugated another tribe, they became circumcised. So does that mean that they now are subjugated because they're going to be delicately removed from activity?
So the question is if you go through the circumcision, it means that you are not, you're going to be subjugated somehow. Not at all. Actually, it's a sign of participation. It's never subjugation. It's participation. Just like we participate with God in the creation. It's when another person circumcised, when they convert to Judaism, they come into the covenant. So it's always a participation. It's never subjugation, and that is that's the direction that we move. I always talk about from Egypt to Rehoboth. Rehoboth is the name of the third temple, the future temple. Egypt is Egypt, right? So, but it means that Egypt is vertical, is the mindset, I am enslaving someone, I'm subjugating. Rehoboth means wide, it means that everybody is on the same level. So that's what it means. You enter the covenant, never subjugation.
And don't forget that unlike now, where individualism is running rampant, okay, that in those days and in the early days of the church, your identity was based on the people you were from. You look at these Christians, see how they love one another. You were identified as a Christian or by what you were doing in terms of belonging to this group. Okay? So your identity was rooted. That's why in the early church, when we had what we called excommunication, you were literally separated from the group. You had lost your identity. Okay? So this idea of, and we don't understand it today because of this idea of individualism. Covenant is very important because what covenant really means is the agreement between God and his people. Okay? The covenant is between God and his people, and we are members of that people. Right? Yes?
I always, when my sons, they ask me, do I want my sons to be circumcised? And I always thought it was a sign of consecration that these would be used for God's will. And that is a form of that is a matter of faith. They also said it was for cleanliness or something else. I don't know what they said. But that was the reason I chose for my sons to be circumcised.
Yeah, there was a time,
Repeat her.
yeah, the question is, that she had her, we was told that the circumcision was both a medical reason or a matter of it being sanitary and so on. And that came from a certain era of growing up, okay? Especially when they was talking about it being not only sanitary, but more medically advantageous, all right? So, but I think we've kind of moved beyond that again. So I don't hear that much of it today. But back in my parents' day, in my mother's day, that's what she used to tell me, that this is why when she was giving birth, she was told, that it would be more advantageous to have your male children circumcised. And then I find out I'm 4% Jewish.
So it's always good to find good reasons why we do the commandments and the advantages that come with it, but that's not why we do it. The reason is never because it's something. The reason is always because God commanded us to do it. So, and that is the covenant. So that's what we definitely follow the rationale. So, one more question? Yeah.
When the slaves left Egypt, they weren't resurrected, they were condemned from being slaves. Wasn't that like a punishment?
So, can you repeat that?
The slaves left Egypt,
Right.
you said they were considered condemned. Is that the word you used? What
No.
word did you use?
No.
No?
When there were slaves
And
who
they-
joined
Yeah.
Israel, and they needed to be circumcised, though, sometime
So,
to join the.
all the people of Israel that left Egypt that time, none of them were circumcised. They had to circumcise because they were slaves. They were forbidden to do the commandment. So they circumcised themselves before receiving the law in Mount Sinai. So it says that there were bloods involved in the covenant with God. One was the blood of the lamb, and the other one is the blood of the circumcision. So yeah, so they
were
all
carrying that
circumcised.
slavery. They were carrying.
They had to rid themselves of.
Yeah,
that
they had to
mindset.
rid themselves of slavery, or to dedicate themselves now to God instead of, right? That's the structure from the house of slavery to enter the house of God. And God tells us to enter my house, to sit in the Passover Seder, which was the first ritual, Jewish ritual, is to circumcise, is to enter my covenant. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, we have a date, I think, I don't know what it is right now. I have it on my calendar, but of course, we run by donations. There is a basket over there. And folks, if they're online, you can also make a donation online. We appreciate any help.
It's
we
the
can get.
16th of February.
16th of February.
Right, February 16th.
Okay, February 16th. Of course, people can join us at any time, so if you have a friend you want to invite, we'd love to have them next time. Okay, thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.